just so excited to be here. This podcast has been 6 years in the making, really. So for you to actually be listening to this just brings me so much joy. In 2020, I purchased a podcast launch plan and chipped away at it very, intermittently, but I kept adding to my dream podcast guest list. And then this year, since going full-time in private practice, I finally had the headspace and clarity and time to really put everything into this podcast. So here we are, finally. But before we jump into the educational and guest episodes for Food is Food, I thought it would be really nice to share a little bit about my journey in terms of my relationship with food and how I ended up working in this space, because I never wanted to work in eating disorders. I originally wanted to be a sports dietitian and never thought I would work in the mental health space. So maybe we'll start with one of the questions that I get asked about all the time regarding my own relationship with food, and then I can tell you a bit about my career and how I ended up as an eating disorder and disordered eating dietitian. So in terms of my own relationship with food, I have always been really in tune with my body and I would say, eaten intuitively. When I was a teenager, I didn't know what intuitive eating was, but reflecting back with the knowledge that I have now, it was definitely something that I did very naturally. I played a lot of sport. I was very academic, and I wasn't influenced by diet culture. We didn't have social media back then. So yeah, there wasn't really anything that sort of negatively impacted my relationship with food up until I was 15. And then what I would say is that I did dabble in some disordered eating behaviors. This was mostly centered around label reading, so looking for specific nutrients, and that would determine the foods that I would allow myself to eat. It probably lasted for a few months, and what triggered it was that I played representative netball, and we had a coach give us some nutrition information around sort of enhancing our performance, and I really took that on board. And that's why I had started to check the labels so that they were aligned with the information that my coach had given us about nutrition. Also in that same time period, we had a sports dietitian come and speak to our regional netball team. And that is when I decided that I was going to work as a dietitian, because I thought it was so cool that the dietitian could go in front of a room full of people and tell them how to eat to maximize their sporting performance. I was just like, wow, that is a job that people have. Before that, I didn't know what a dietitian was. But yeah, back to this little short period of a few months where I dabbled in label reading. I'm super lucky it didn't progress into anything. I have never had an eating disorder. But what I can remember at the time is that I used to get really bad stomach pain. Now, whether that was because my diet was missing something at the time, I'm not too sure. But I remember one day my parents had come back they'd gone out, I'm not sure, and they'd come back and I was lying on the couch, sort of in a lot of pain. And my mum walked in and she said, "We're having pizza for dinner." And we bought takeaway pizza. And from what I can recall, that was sort of brought an end to me checking food labels. I think, I don't know, my mum maybe just talked some sense into me, or maybe it was just that one sort of action of we're having pizza and pizza is normal and fine to eat that just shifted my behaviors. So yeah, it's really interesting that I had started to sort of dabble in some, unhealthy eating behaviors, and at the same time develop this really keen interest and desire to become a dietitian. I then went to study a Bachelor of Nutrition and Dietetics at the University of Wollongong in Australia. And after my 4 years of studying, I was really lucky to get a new graduate job in Sydney. Now, I started studying dietetics 17 years ago, and at that time, the nutrition space was very much centered around low-fat foods and higher protein products. A little bit like now, which is sort of scary that it's come back around, but that's what happens with nutrition trends. So I was also just very conscious from my education as a dietitian about the types of foods that I was consuming at the time. So I was someone that ate no-fat yogurt and, fully skimmed milk and protein bars, thinking that they were the best option for me. Interestingly, in the first couple of weeks that I started my job, as my first job as a dietitian, it was in an aged care and rehabilitation hospital. The senior dietitian said to me, by the end of this year, you will be drinking full-fat milk. And I thought she was out of her mind. I was like, why would you recommend that when we've been taught to recommend low-fat products at university? But thank you, Beryl, if you are listening to this, because you really did plant that seed in my mind and you did help to shift my understanding of nutrition. So following that, the first couple of years that I worked as a dietitian, I was working in general surgical and medical wards. Again, nothing to do with mental health. And then for some reason, I don't know why, I ended up attending a non-diet approach workshop by Fiona Sutherland and Fiona Willer, two amazing dietitians in Australia. And that, again, just planted another seed that maybe there's a different way that I can approach nutrition counselling. And then I was really interested in pediatric dietetics at the time. And again, really lucky, got a job as a pediatric dietitian at one of Sydney's pediatric hospitals. And on the first day, I was allocated a few different wards, one of them being the adolescent mental health ward, which had 8 eating disorder beds. And I was so worried. I remember coming home and being really partly scared, partly annoyed. I was like, why did I get allocated this ward? I really didn't want to work in eating disorders. But funnily enough, the world works in wonderful ways, and it ended up being the best allocation that I was given. I absolutely loved it. I loved how valued I felt. I loved that there were sort of long-term relationships that were being built. I really liked working with patients' families. And that, again, just planted a seed of working in eating disorders. So I started to develop these two interests, pediatrics and eating disorders. And that contract after 2 years came to an end. And a silver lining that I now reflect back on is that I had been offered another pediatric job, and my manager at the time was my referee. And I found out on the Thursday, I was meant to be starting the job on the Monday, that she didn't pass my reference check. Now, as a young dietitian who thought they were doing a good job, that really broke my confidence. And I remember crying in her office on my last day, trying to figure out why the reference hadn't been passed. And, she also said to me that maybe I should consider an alternative career in food photography. But we'll leave it at that. I think that happened for a reason, and I'm so glad it did happen, because then I didn't get this pediatric job that I so badly wanted. There were a few eating disorder roles that were out at the time, and I applied for them and I got them. And that is where my eating disorder journey really kicks off. So then I worked 3 different jobs at once. I worked for the Butterfly Foundation, which is Australia's eating disorder charity, as their contract dietitian for the intensive outpatient program. And then I worked part-time on an adult eating disorder inpatient unit in a private hospital, and part-time as a community eating disorder dietitian in an adult public health service. And they were the 3 jobs that I had before I moved to the UK in 2018. So I am super blessed. Things really do happen for a reason. I'm a true believer of that. And then that led me to moved to the UK and continued to work in eating disorders, and I haven't looked back. So across both Australia and the UK, I have worked in private and public inpatient units, day programs, and in the community or outpatient settings for both adults and adolescents, children and adolescents. So I really do have that breadth of experience across all ages and all of the different treatment settings, right through from your really intensive inpatient to your community outpatient, hospital in the home settings. I've done home visits where people have, beautifully helped, let me into their home, into their kitchens, and working private practice at the same time over the last 6 years. So I went full-time in private practice in November last year. I founded the TCN clinic in 2021, and I was the sole dietitian. I did not think it would be the beautiful clinic with a team of dietitians that all specialize in eating disorders and disordered eating and share my same approach. But I'm so proud of where the clinic has come and the number of people that we've been able to support through the whole spectrum of what relationship with food looks like. So we support people with disordered eating, those who want to learn more about intuitive eating, those who are fed up of yo-yo dieting, through to people with diagnosed anorexia, binge eating disorder. And also we support people who don't have disordered eating or an eating disorder, but they want a non-diet and weight-inclusive approach to whichever sort of health condition or food challenge they're trying to work through. So that is how I came to eating disorders. Never wanted to work in this area, but currently cannot see myself working anywhere else. Nothing else really feels right. It doesn't feel aligned with how I like to work. So you are stuck with me in this space. I think the other really important thing that shaped my understanding of eating disorders, or definitely given me an insight into how it impacts a person's life personally, is that my best friend had bulimia. So she is fully recovered. So she is one of my incredible inspirations. I really had no idea what an eating disorder was. At university, we had a one-hour lecture on eating disorders. So again, I just didn't understand what it would be like to work in eating disorders when I studied dietetics, which I think also sort of added to that massive pushback of wanting to work in the area originally. But yeah, I have this memory of my beautiful friend coming over to my parents' house one day to see me after she'd been discharged from the inpatient setting. And she was telling me about how her dietitian had prescribed for her to have dessert. It was definitely once a day, maybe twice a day. And because I was very much in my diet culture, low fat, high protein belief of what nutrition looked like, because that's what I was being taught at uni, I remember saying to her, I couldn't believe it. It was really unhealthy for her. What was the dietitian thinking? That sort of a thing, which I reflect back now and just am like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. It must have been so invalidating and potentially triggering for the eating disorder thoughts to grow louder in the moment. Before she told me that she was admitted to hospital, I did not know that she had disordered eating. I just thought she was eating super healthily. So I'm sharing this because I want you to remember that I'm human, your friends are human, your family members are human. Even your healthcare team, they are humans too, and they may not have worked in this area long enough to really understand the complexities of an eating disorder and may not have had the opportunity to learn from their patients and clients. And I think that's the thing, is that eating disorders and understanding what disordered eating means and how it's influenced and how a person's relationship with food is shaped, it all takes time to understand. And so I totally get it when people's family or friends make unhelpful comments, because it comes down to just not understanding the illness and how relationship with food is shaped. So I really just want to reinforce that, we all get it wrong sometimes. And that's part of the human experience, is that we get it wrong, we learn from it, we make mistakes. And that's what we're going to learn about intuitive eating too in, future episodes. So I hope that just gives you a little bit of a fast track as to why I'm here. I absolutely love working in this area, and I truly believe that recovery is possible, and I will always, always hold hope for the people that I am supporting, because I have so much evidence from friends, colleagues, and people that I've supported that recovery is 100% possible. And how I work is very compassionate-led, and I like to intertwine sort of the evidence base of dietetics and science, combining skills that I've learned through trainings in CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, motivational interviewing, into the learnings that I have from my biggest teachers, which are my clients and patients. I don't think I would know half as much if I didn't remain curious and learn from them myself. So this podcast is really here to bring nuance to those discussions about nutrition, because everyone's relationship with food has been shaped by their story. And it's so terrifying how much nutrition noise is out there and how many extreme messages are being promoted without considering the individual. So I really hope that I can create that curious and compassionate space. And I really can't wait to have you join me. So we will be joined by a combination of guests sharing their expertise and knowledge, and also some solo episodes from me. Hopefully in the future, I'll be able to run some Q&A type episodes. We're just going to keep it flexible and see what comes up, what helps you the most. But for now, thank you for being here. And I just can't wait to have you join me. So thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to Food is Food. If you found the episode nourishing, hit subscribe so you don't miss our weekly episodes. And just before we wrap up, a little reminder that the discussions in each episode are for informational purposes and don't replace individualised advice, because every recovery journey is so unique. Please consult your healthcare provider for support. That's all for today. Stay nourished and see you next time.